Alright, so some people would argue that globalization is really bad for the world and it's causing a lot more problems than positive aspects that it's creating. However, I'm going to tell you why that isn't true and why a lot of what anti-globalists have to say is actually ridiculous in a sense. Um, I mean, they do have some valid points, don't get me wrong, and I mean, everyone I guess is entitled to their own opinion on things, but the facts state and show that globalization is good and it's a trend that's going to continue down the road in the future. So people who anti-globalists who claim that globalization is bad for the world are going to try to tell you that poor countries don't benefit from it as much as developed nations do. This is extremely ridiculous claim because developing nations, although their workers don't get paid as much as you would here, it provides them with job opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. So a great example of this is going to be China. China, not even hundreds of years ago, 20, 25 years ago, was a poor nation. Majority of their population was poor. There wasn't many jobs. A lot of people didn't have the education to get high-paying jobs, and there wasn't many low-paying jobs available. So they really didn't have the opportunity to work at all. However, what a big part of globalization is outsourcing, and developed nations like America outsourced a lot of their factories to China for cheaper labor. This in turn is great for consumers in the States, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But it also benefits China because it provides Chinese people with jobs that they wouldn't otherwise be given. So a great example to outline how actually good this is was there was a statistic in the World Bank, I believe. I'll cite it for you, Mr. Shea. Um, but in the World Bank website, it shows that China um, since 1978, when globalization became prominent in China, over 500 million Chinese citizens have gotten over the poverty line. Although China still is one of the richest nations in impoverished people, um, this is extremely significant because now the poverty line, or the amount of people who are impoverished in China, is actually below 100 million people, which is significant because that's not even a tenth of their population. So that's definitely showing an increase in a positive trend that we can look at. So this really shows how developing nations benefit because it gives workers the opportunity to go out and earn money. This helps them support their families, and even though it's not giving them the idealistic Western life, it's giving them a better quality of life than they otherwise would have had. So obviously not everyone in the world is ever going to be equal. I mean, it's a really idealistic approach, but it's just not realistic in most senses, and people will never truly be equal financially, equal human rights wise, just equal in general. So then I was going to look at developed nations as well. So anti-globalists also claim that developed nations are actually losing many jobs annually due to outsourcing, and this is true to an extent because they're losing some jobs to their factories outsourcing to cheaper labor countries like China. However, they're gaining more like office jobs, managerial jobs, linguistics jobs, that kind of stuff, because well, stores they need more workers to sell more goods because they're being supplied with more goods, because more consumers are buying their goods because they're a cheaper, more affordable rate. So this creates job opportunities. I actually read a statistic showing that in 1993 to 2001 in the United States, it's really hard to get stats on Canada, but in the United States, the job 3 million jobs were lost to outsourcing in that 10-year period. However, almost 6 million jobs were gained during that same time period. So this shows for every one job lost to outsourcing, 2 jobs were actually gained, according to San Francisco Bank research. Um, Consumerism is also a big part of the benefits of developed nations. So it makes goods and services cheaper to consumers in the nation. So this is going to benefit the economy, obviously, because with more money going into the economy, through more people being able to purchase goods, the economy is going to be boosted, and you can definitely see that. But not only does it help developed nations economically, it also helps developing nations. As you can see, China, again, a great example. Same with Taiwan and Sweden. China, their GDP has grown by almost 10% annually since globalization became prominent in the world. I mean, it's always been a big thing, but when outsourcing became very common, that's when China started growing to a huge extent economically. So this is extremely relevant because China is becoming an economic powerhouse, and it's still considered a developing nation, However, it's becoming more recognizable on the global scale. So, I mean, basically to conclude, although some people may argue that globalization abuses human rights of people who live in poorer nations because they can work them for cheaper labor, it's ridiculous if people want to call it slavery because there's workers lining up to get jobs there. It raises their quality of living and it helps benefit their economy in the long run. A great example of this, I know I'm a little bit over the time limit here, but can be shown through Sweden. 150 years ago, Sweden was filled with sweatshops. A lot of stuff that people would say is abusing human rights. However, now Sweden is actually ranked the second best place to live in the world according to quality of life, and this is because through that time period, the rebuilding process, or not even just the building process in general, Sweden had a lot of factory workers. They were creating a lot of goods for other countries at cheaper labor, so countries were outsourcing to Sweden, and now they've become one of the greatest nations in the world according to many scholars. So this shows how globalization helped benefit them significantly. And then also, if you look at a country like Taiwan, Taiwan is a more modern example of Sweden. 30 years ago, I believe, they were as poor as Kenya is today. And through cheap factory labor and creating goods and opening up factories all over the place, they've become one of the like bigger countries on the rise in today's economy. So it definitely has its benefits. A lot more benefits than people might claim to say it is because their working conditions might not always be ideal, but they're better than nothing, and it provides citizens in those nations with an opportunity to work and with the chance to gain better quality lives.